This lesson is on tips, taxes, and interest. A couple of things you need to know are some vocabulary words. Principal. Principal is not just the person that's in charge of a school. Principal also means the money you start with in a savings account. So if you deposit some money in the bank to save it, or if you invest it in an investment account, that is the principal. That's the money you start with. That is your money. Interest is the money that you earn on your savings or your investment. It's usually a percentage of the principal. You'll hear 5% per year or 3%, 2%. Sometimes interest is also the amount of money you pay on a loan that you borrow. So if somebody loans you an amount, that's the principal. And then you owe them some extra money. That's the interest, and that's a percentage of the principal that you owe. So the principal is the money you start with, and the interest is the money that's earned on the principal. It's a percentage of the principal, and it's added to the principal. A tip is a gratuity. It is another word for you may hear. You probably don't use it a lot, but you will. If you ever hear the word gratuity, you need to think of a tip. Think of going out to eat, and you sit down in a restaurant and you pay for dinner, and then the last thing you do is, after you pay for dinner, is you leave a few dollars on the table. You've probably seen your parents do that, and that is a tip for the waiter or the waitress, and it's usually for good service. So it's something you don't owe it, but it is for good service. So let's talk about this. Taxes, tips, and interest are a percentage added to the original amount. So it's a percentage of the original amount, and then you add it to the original amount. Now a discount, I hope everybody knows what a discount is. A discount is money that you don't have to pay. They take a certain amount of money off of the original price, and you don't have to pay that. And again, it is a percentage of the original amount, and you subtract that. So you first thing you have to do in all these is you have to calculate the percentage and then either add it or subtract it from the original amount. All right? And if interest is earned for more than 1 year, don't forget to add the interest for each year to the original amount. So we'll talk about that in just a second when we switch pages. All right, we have a few problems here. Problem number 1 says the regular price is $75 and the discount is 25%, and they want you to know the sale price. So what they're really asking is, what is 25% of $75? And we have to translate that into simple numbers that we can work with, and the 25% has to be changed to a decimal. So we're going to make the decimal visible here, move it over 2 places. Now it becomes 0.25 or 25 hundredths of, we know, means times, and then $75 we can just write as 75. So now we have 0.25 times 75. So we'll do that over here. 75, 0.25, 5 times 5, 25. 5 times 7, 35 plus 2, 37. Placeholder, 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15. Let's add those together. 5, 7, 8, and 1. So 1875, and we have 2 decimals. So this here is $18.75. So the discount is equal to $18.75. But they don't want to know what the discount is. They want to know the sale price. They don't pay this is the amount they don't pay. We want to know the amount they do pay. So let's erase this. So we have a little room to work here. And let's write down 75, and we're going to subtract 18.75. And you notice I did this because our decimals have to line. There's an invisible decimal here. Well, how do I subtract 75 from nothing? There's nothing. if there's nothing here, I have to make those zeros visible as placeholder because we can put zeros there when there's nothing there. A zero represents nothing. So now we have 75, and by the way, money is written. $75 is not written like that. $75 is written like this, 75.00, because money is always written to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to subtract, so we need to do some borrowing. We have a 4 there. This is going to be 10, but it's going to become a 9 eventually, so I'm going to just make it 9 and then make that 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 7 is 2. Have our decimal there. And we need to borrow here because you can't do 4 minus 8, not without a negative number anyway. So we make that 6, and that becomes 14. 14 minus 8 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. And so the sale price is $56.25. So she didn't pay the 18 cents. So the first thing you have to do is calculate the discount, which is $18.75. 25% of $75 is $18.75. And then subtract that from the original amount. So 75 minus $18.75 is $56.25, and that is what he or she paid. Let me show you another way you can do this. You know that the whole thing must equal 100%, correct? Well, the discount is 25%, so if we subtract 25%, that equals 75%. So we know she's not going to pay the 25%. She is going to pay, or he is going to pay, the 75%. So instead, we could calculate what is 75% of $75. We don't have to write that 0.00. We could just say, what is 75% of 75? And so we'll take that over, and 0.75 times 75, and that's going to equal, if we do the math, 56.25, and that's the discount amount. And you only have to calculate this percentage. You don't have to do the subtract. Well, you are doing some subtraction here. But a lot of times you can look at it and say 25%. Well, I know the rest of it, because the total has to be 100%. I know the rest of it must be 75%. So then you can just change that to a decimal, calculate it, and there's your sale price. So you have two ways of finding the discount. All right. So a discount, remember, we subtract. Let's look at problem number 2. It's a tip, so we are going to add a tip to the original price. So we take $85, or what they're really asking is 15% of $85. So 15% of $85, correct? Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my decimal. 1, 2. So I have 0.15 times 85. And I'm going to leave off the decimal and the zeros there because I don't really need those. So now I have 0.15 times 85. So I'm going to go ahead and do the math. 85 times 0.15. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 2 is 42. Bring down the placeholder a 0. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 8 is 8. Add that together. 5 plus 0 is 5. 5 plus 2 is 7. 8 plus 4 is 12. So I have 1275, but I have a decimal. How many places do I have? 1, 2, 1, 2. So $12.75 is the tip. So my tip amount is 12.75. Now, a tip is something I add. So I need to take my original amount, $85. I'm going to go ahead and write it like real money with a decimal and 2 zeros next to it because I know I've got a decimal and some money after that. So 12.75. I've lined up my decimals. Remember, we line up our decimals whenever we add or subtract. So 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 0 is 7. Make sure I put my decimal down. 5 plus 2 is 7. 8 plus 1 is 9. So the total amount between the original amount and so the total price is $97.75. Total price between the original price and the tip. You add them together and it is $97.75. So let's talk about interest. How much will be in Lily's account at the end of 3 years if she deposits $700 and the simple interest rate is 5% per year? So the principal, the money she starts with, is $700. That's what she starts with. And she's getting 5% per year for 3 years. So the interest is 5%. And don't forget, 3 years. I'm doing this to organize the information because I don't want it to get lost up here. I'm going to go back and check. She deposits $700. That's her principal. Her interest rate here, 5% per year. Okay, but we know that it's going to be for 3 years. So now I've got my basic information written here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to calculate what is 5% of $700. So let me write that down here. 5% of $700. Now let's turn that into some numbers we can use. Let's make our decimal visible. Move it over 2 places so that we are now in the hundredths place. So now it is 0.05. 5% is 0.05. It is not 0.5. It is 0.05. We have to move it over 2 places and put in a placeholder. Don't forget that. Of means multiply. And $700, we can just write down the 700 instead of the decimal followed by the zeros. So now I have 5% or 0.05 or 5 hundredths. This is the hundredths plates. And that makes sense. Excuse me. 5%, 5 per hundred, and 5 hundredths. It should be the same. It should make sense. So 5 hundredths times 700. Let me do that over here. 700 times 0.05. 5 times 0, 0. 5 times 0, 0. 5 times 7, 35. Now I don't have to do the 0 because this 0 times all these is going to be 0. So I'm not going to spend the time. But I have 2 decimal places. So 2 decimal places. So she earned at that 5%, she earned $35 per year. But she did that for 3 years. So I need to multiply that times 3. Well, 3 times 35 equals 105. I'm not going to bore you with that mathematics. I'm sure we can accept that. And if you do it yourself, you can verify that I got it right. 35 times 3 is $105. And notice sometimes you can write the cents up here like that. Sometimes you write it with a decimal like that. But that's how the cents are represented. So now we have, she earned, this is what she earned over 3 years. She earned $105. But we have to add that to the principal amount. Now, since this is a savings account, this isn't money she's paying on top of the loan. This is money she earned. The bank gave her this money for letting them invest her money. So let's take the $700 and we're going to add the $105. And I'm going to make my life simple since there's no pennies, no cents involved. I'm not going to make the decimals visible. I'm just going to leave it like that. And I'm going to add these two together. 0 plus 5 is 5. 0 plus 0 is 0. 7 plus 1 is 8. Now, in my answer, I'm going to make sure that I put my dollar sign so I can have labels. And I'm going to write 805. And now I'm going to make my decimal and my decimal numbers visible so it looks like real money. The total amount if she invested $700 after 3 years, earning 5% or $35 per year, was $805.